Welcome the anointed ones. Justice doesn't knock. It enters when the clock strikes truth. There is a moment, rare, exact, and unmistakable, when the balance finally tips. Not with thunder, not with public spectacle, but with timing so precise it leaves no room for denial. 3 hours ago wasn't random. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't dramatic for entertainment. It was calculated. Divine justice is never late, never early, and never sloppy. When it lands with intent. Here's a fact people don't like to admit. Most justice doesn't happen in courtrooms, comment sections, or public apologies. It happens internally first. Long before consequences show up in real life, something fractures inside the person who thought they were safe. Neuroscience even confirms this. The human brain reacts to perceived loss of control before it processes external consequences. That sudden anxiety, the mental fog, the spiraling thoughts, that's not stress, that's awareness arriving uninvited. And let's be honest for a second, people who live off manipulation are allergic to timing they can't control. They can rehearse lies, rehearse innocence, rehearse tears, but they cannot rehearse the exact second God decides, enough. That's why when justice hits, it feels unfair to them. Not because it is, but because it's no longer negotiable. What makes this moment unsettling is that nothing looks different on the outside. The sun still rose, phones still buzzed, coffee still got cold on someone's table. Yet something shifted so deeply that the person involved felt it before anyone else could name it. That's how divine justice moves. It doesn't need an audience. It just needs accuracy. And yes, it's almost funny in a quiet way. Because while she was probably planning her next move, life suddenly handed her a plot twist she didn't audition for. No script, no rehearsal, no damage control meeting, just reality showing up like, "Hi, we need to talk." This isn't revenge energy. This isn't karma for clicks. This is correction. This is alignment. This is what happens when patience runs its course and truth clocks in for its shift, right on time. Stay with me, because once you understand how and why this kind of justice hits the way it does, you'll never confuse delay for escape again. Number 1. Justice didn't arrive with noise, it arrived with precision. People expect justice to be loud. They think it shows up with arguments, exposure, embarrassment, or some dramatic public downfall. But real justice doesn't waste energy performing. It moves with accuracy. It targets the exact place that matters most, the place no one else can reach. That's why when it hits, it feels sudden, personal, and undeniable. Precision means nothing extra was touched. No innocent people got caught in the crossfire. No random chaos. Just a clean strike at the core of the issue. That's how you know this wasn't coincidence or bad luck. This wasn't life being unfair. This was correction landing exactly where it needed to land. When justice is precise, there's no confusion about who it's for. Noise gives people room to distract themselves. Precision removes escape routes. There's no crowd to hide in, no argument to win, no story to twist. What hit her didn't come with explanations or warnings. It came with clarity. And clarity is uncomfortable when someone has been living off denial. Precision also explains the timing. It didn't happen too early because the lesson wouldn't have stuck. It didn't happen too late because damage has an expiration date. It happened when the truth could no longer be avoided. That's not random. That's intelligence at work. This kind of justice doesn't shout because it doesn't need validation. It doesn't argue because it already knows the facts. It doesn't announce itself because it's not trying to convince anyone. It simply adjusts the balance. And once the balance shifts, everything else follows naturally. That's why the impact feels heavy, even though nothing obvious changed on the outside. Precision works inward first. It rearranges thoughts, shakes confidence, disrupts sleep, and removes the sense of control people rely on to feel safe. When control disappears, panic replaces arrogance, and the most unsettling part is that precision leaves no one else to blame. There's no villain to point at, no unfair system to accuse. What remains is the realization that this wasn't an accident. It was exact, it was measured, and it was earned. That's the difference between noise and justice. Noise tries to be noticed. Precision doesn't care who's watching. It just lands, and once it does, there's no undoing it. Number 2, what hit her wasn't punishment. It was exposure. Most people misunderstand what happens when justice lands. They think it's about taking something away, causing pain, or teaching a lesson through loss. That's only part of it. The real impact, the part that leaves someone unsettled and shaken, comes from exposure. It's when the walls they built around themselves, the lies, the manipulation, the hidden agendas, are peeled back and seen for what they really are. It's not the external consequences that sting the most. It's the internal recognition that they've been living a story no longer supported by truth. Exposure cuts deeper than punishment because it forces self-awareness. She thought her actions were invisible, her schemes untouchable, and her control absolute. What landed 3 hours ago tore that illusion apart. Suddenly, every calculated move, every hidden word, every private betrayal became visible. Not to the world necessarily, but in a way she couldn't deny. The human mind can rationalize losses, spin stories, or blame luck. Exposure gives no room for rationalization. It forces confrontation with reality, and reality is relentless. This is why the shock is so intense. She isn't just reacting to what happened externally, she's reacting to what she has always known deep down, but refused to acknowledge. The fear, the anxiety, the racing thoughts are all symptoms of her internal walls crumbling. What she thought was strength was actually fragility, and what she thought was security was just a temporary blindfold. Exposure doesn't ask permission. It doesn't wait for confession. It simply removes the mask and forces a reckoning with who she really is. Exposure also explains why the moment feels unbearable. Punishment can be fought, appealed, or ignored. Exposure is unavoidable. It leaves no one to blame, no loopholes to exploit. She can't manipulate it, and she can't escape it. What remains is raw truth, and truth has a way of making people confront themselves in ways nothing else can. When justice hits, what terrifies is not the loss, it's the mirror. Exposure ensures that the person who thought they were untouchable sees themselves exactly as they are, and that is far more powerful, far more permanent, and far more devastating than any punishment could ever be. Number 3. God didn't confront her publicly because her crime was private. Not every wrong deserves a public spectacle. Some actions are hidden in shadows, whispered in corners, and carried out when no one is looking. That's exactly what makes them dangerous. They thrive on secrecy and assume invisibility is safety. The moment she felt the shift 3 hours ago, it wasn't because God needed an audience. It was because the truth had reached a point where it could no longer hide. Private actions require private correction, and that's exactly what she received. The subtlety of this kind of justice is what makes it so unsettling. She expected witnesses, drama, or gossip to signal her downfall, but nothing came. That's the difference between being caught and being exposed. Being caught can be managed with lies, excuses, or charm. Exposure leaves no room to maneuver. Private sins receive private reckoning because the real damage is done internally long before the outside world ever notices. God doesn't need to amplify it for impact. He simply removes the shields, and the consequences follow naturally. This method also strikes at the very core of control. People who operate in secrecy rely on their ability to manipulate perception. They believe that as long as no one knows, they are untouchable. But the moment private corruption is confronted privately, all their assumptions collapse. There's no escape through reputation, no distraction through spectacle, no audience to sway with words. The reckoning is intimate, direct, and unavoidable. It hits where it hurts most, the mind and conscience. And the beauty of private justice is that it doesn't leave collateral damage. Others aren't dragged into the chaos. No one else suffers because of what she did. The impact is surgical, targeting exactly what needs to be corrected while leaving the rest untouched. This is why she feels exposed, anxious, and off balance even though nothing happened publicly. She's facing the reality she thought she could avoid forever. Private actions always meet private judgment first, and when that judgment lands, it cannot be negotiated, spun, or delayed. God doesn't need an audience to make the point clear. He only needs precision, timing, and truth. And that is exactly what she experienced 3 hours ago. Number 4. The shock came from how fast it happened, not that it happened. She didn't see it coming, not because she was unaware of her actions, but because she assumed time was on her side. People like her operate under the illusion that delay equals safety. They think that as long as consequences aren't immediate, they have immunity. That's where the misconception lies. Justice doesn't follow human schedules. When it arrives, it hits at the exact moment it is meant to, sudden, precise, and undeniable. The speed of its arrival is what throws people off, not the fact that it was inevitable. She had built her life around control and manipulation, believing that patience could be exploited, that mistakes could be hidden, and that reality could be bent to her favor. 3 hours ago, all of that certainty shattered. Speed in divine justice is often mistaken for unfairness, but it's actually a form of clarity. It signals that delay was only temporary, that observation and endurance had run their course, and that timing was finally right for the truth to take hold. The psychological impact is brutal because it leaves no time to prepare. She couldn't rehearse responses, spin her narrative, or craft excuses. The mind scrambles when patterns assumed permanent suddenly collapse. That frantic realization, the shock, isn't about the punishment itself, but about the sudden loss of assumed control. People are more unsettled by how quickly reality catches up to them than by the reality itself. The speed also removes the comfort of denial. She can't convince herself that circumstances will change, that she has more time, or that someone will intervene. The abruptness forces an internal reckoning, an unavoidable confrontation with what she has done and who she has become. And the most striking part is that the impact doesn't fade with time. The swiftness of what hit her engraves itself into memory, leaving a permanent impression. It's a reminder that control was never hers to hold, that assumptions about timing were dangerous, and that truth operates on its own clock. When justice comes fast, it's not chaotic, it's precise, intentional, and unforgettable. That's why the shock doesn't come from the act itself, but from the speed at which reality finally caught up to her. Number 5. What broke wasn't her situation, it was her sense of control. She didn't lose possessions, status, or influence in the way most people expect. What shattered was far deeper, the illusion that she had control over everything around her. That sense of dominance, the belief that she could bend people, outcomes, and situations to her will, evaporated in an instant. And that's far more destabilizing than any external loss. People can recover material things, rebuild reputations, or manipulate circumstances again. But once control slips through your fingers, panic sets in, and it's impossible to regain the same illusion of power. Her entire life had been a carefully orchestrated performance. She measured words, observed reactions, and manipulated situations to her favor. That intricate balance gave her confidence. She thought she could handle anything, that her environment would bend to her logic, and that consequences were optional. 3 hours ago, that architecture of control crumbled. What she's facing now is the raw, disorienting reality of power lost, not physical, but psychological. It's why fear and anxiety hit her so sharply. It's why her mind races and her stomach knots. It's the chaos of realizing that influence isn't inherent. It's borrowed from perception, and perception is gone. This kind of breaking doesn't require punishment, exposure, or public humiliation. It's surgical. It targets the part of the human experience that feels most safe, the belief that we can manage outcomes. Once that disappears, all the little schemes, rationalizations, and manipulations that once worked collapse too. The person left standing is facing themselves unshielded, unarmed, and unprepared. And this is precisely why divine justice is so effective. It doesn't always need to touch what's external. When the illusion of control is gone, the consequences take care of themselves. Actions she once thought unstoppable are now powerless. Words she once thought persuasive are now irrelevant. People she thought loyal are now indifferent. The collapse of control is the real reset button, and it hurts far more than anything she could have imagined. It's not the situation that's terrifying. It's the sudden, unrelenting clarity that she is no longer in charge. Number 6. God didn't defend you loudly because he didn't need witnesses. Divine protection doesn't require a crowd. It doesn't need applause, social media validation, or anyone standing beside you to nod in approval. 3 hours ago, when justice struck her, you were shielded in a way that was invisible to the outside world. That's the hallmark of true alignment. When correction happens, the innocent are never exposed to unnecessary collateral damage, and protection is so precise that it doesn't need to announce itself. She expected to see resistance, confrontation, or public interference, because that's how humans think power works. People equate defense with noise. They believe that if someone is protected, it should be obvious. But God operates differently. He doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. When he acts, the results speak louder than appearances ever could. You didn't feel a fight, you didn't see chaos, and no one else had to step in because the intervention was surgical, quiet, and absolute. That's why the moment felt almost surreal to her. There was no debate, no bargaining, no dramatic display, just the undeniable shift of circumstances that she couldn't manipulate or escape. This kind of invisible defense is disarming. It leaves the aggressor bewildered. They are so used to relying on human logic, human resistance, and human oversight that when none of it manifests, their confidence collapses. They thought their actions had weight, that consequences could be managed, that the world would witness their schemes unfold on their timeline. But they miscalculated. Divine intervention bypasses the ego entirely and deals directly with truth. The quietness of God's protection also ensures that you remain untouched by the emotional or social fallout. You don't have to expend energy defending yourself or explaining what happened. The alignment is already complete, the outcome already secured, and the integrity of your path preserved. What she felt instead, the shock, the panic, the sudden unraveling, was a byproduct of this invisible justice. It wasn't about you fighting back. It was about her losing the ability to manipulate, control, or intimidate. That's the power of divine protection. It doesn't need witnesses, because truth alone is enough to deliver the outcome. Number 7. Her spirit recognized the judgment before her mind did. Before her thoughts could catch up, her body already knew something had shifted. That sudden tightness in her chest, the unease that wouldn't go away, the racing heartbeat. These weren't coincidences. Her spirit sensed it first. The truth has a way of reaching the deepest part of a person before their rational mind can make sense of it. 3 hours ago, what she felt wasn't confusion or panic. It was awareness, raw and immediate, penetrating every part of her that had once been insulated by arrogance and denial. The human mind likes to rationalize. It spins stories, searches for excuses, and tries to argue reality into something manageable. But the spirit doesn't negotiate. It reacts instantly to alignment or disruption. That moment of judgment bypassed her logic and went straight to the core of her being. She could try to analyze it afterward, explain it, or blame coincidence. But that inner recognition couldn't be erased. It hit first, undeniable and inescapable. This is what makes divine justice so unsettling to those who think they are untouchable. It doesn't wait for them to understand, plan, or manipulate. It arrives internally before the external world even shifts. That internal alarm, the spiritual recognition, is relentless because it doesn't sleep, it doesn't lie, and it doesn't depend on anyone else noticing. She couldn't silence it, ignore it, or spin it into her favor. The power of this moment is terrifying because it forces a confrontation with truth at the deepest level. Her mind was scrambling to catch up, but by then her spirit had already registered the full weight of the judgment. That's why panic sets in before anything happens externally. It's why fear feels so sudden, so sharp, and so unavoidable. She felt the correction in the part of herself that cannot lie, manipulate, or hide, the part that knows exactly what is right, wrong, and deserved. When justice arrives this way, the external world becomes almost secondary. The real reckoning happens inside first, and that internal collapse is far more powerful and permanent than any visible consequence. 3 hours ago, her spirit didn't just sense the truth, it declared it, long before her mind could even process it. Number 8. What she's facing now is memory replay, not imagination. The moment she felt the shift 3 hours ago, it wasn't random fear or paranoia. It was memory catching up with her. Every choice, every hidden word, every action she thought was buried, resurfaced with unrelenting clarity. Divine justice has a way of replaying truth inside the mind before it manifests externally. And that's exactly what she experienced. Her spiraling thoughts, her sudden unease, the tight knot in her chest. These were the echoes of her past decisions hitting her all at once, forcing acknowledgement she had long avoided. This is why what she's feeling is so disorienting. People often confuse panic with reality, assuming that what they fear is fabricated or blown out of proportion. But memory replay doesn't lie. It doesn't exaggerate. It doesn't cater to comfort. It shows exactly what was done, exactly what was neglected, and exactly what consequences were building quietly over time. The moment isn't imagination. It's a collision with undeniable truth. Her past actions are showing up as present reality, and that realization is impossible to spin or negotiate with. It's also why external circumstances might not look drastically different, yet she feels everything collapsing. Memory replay works internally first, unraveling the mental scaffolding she relied on to justify herself. Every manipulation she once thought clever, every betrayal she thought invisible, every corner she cut now comes back to haunt her, unfiltered and undeniable. That internal reckoning is far more powerful than anything outside could be, because it attacks the core of confidence she once thought untouchable. This is what makes her reactions so uncontrollable. It's not fear of the future, it's the undeniable confrontation with the past. Her mind is forced to process what she already knows deep down, and her body responds with all the symptoms of someone losing grip. There's no escape, no denial, no spin. What she's facing is the echo of her own actions, amplified by timing and precision. 3 hours ago, memory replay struck first, and that is what makes the reckoning so devastating, intimate, and unavoidable. Number 9. The reason you feel calm is because justice wasn't your job. 3 hours ago, when everything shifted for her, you weren't dragged into chaos, panic, or the spiral of consequence. That's because divine justice never requires the innocent to fight battles meant for the guilty. Your calm wasn't luck, coincidence, or passive oversight. It was proof that your alignment, integrity, and patience placed you outside the storm. You didn't have to intervene, manipulate, or prove anything. The correction happened exactly where it needed to, leaving you untouched and unaffected. The calm you feel is deceptive to observers who think that justice is loud, dramatic, and communal. They believe someone must visibly fight back to be vindicated. But the truth is, when you are in harmony with truth and divine timing, the universe handles the heavy lifting for you. You remain steady, while those who caused harm crumble under the weight of what they themselves created. That stillness is a mark of your protection and the efficiency of precise justice. It doesn't waste energy where it isn't needed. This also explains why she is spiraling while you remain composed. Her panic is a direct reflection of her own unraveling. She is forced to face the consequences internally because there is no one else to carry the weight for her. Meanwhile, you observe the outcome from a place of clarity and security. The contrast isn't coincidence, it's alignment. Your calm is the proof that when God or divine order intervenes, those who are meant to be shielded are always shielded, and those who are meant to be corrected are left to confront themselves. Your stillness also amplifies the impact of justice on her. There's no distraction, no argument, no sympathy. All she sees is her unraveling and the quiet evidence that her actions no longer hold power over anyone. That silence, paired with her internal reckoning, magnifies her shock and despair. You don't have to participate in her downfall because it isn't your burden. It's hers, alone. 3 hours ago, justice found its target, and you stayed untouched, calm, and observant. That's why true alignment always carries a quiet strength, while the guilty bear the full force of their own reckoning. Number 10. God didn't warn her because warning time expired. Warnings have a shelf life. They come when there's still room for choice, when correction can be prevented or avoided. But once someone turns repeated opportunities into patterns of defiance, the window closes. 3 hours ago, she felt the weight of judgment because the time for caution had passed. God didn't need to signal, plead, or give her another chance. The lesson wasn't about negotiation, it was about finality. What hit her wasn't sudden luck or coincidence. It was the natural outcome of extended denial meeting inevitable consequence. She had pushed boundaries, ignored signals, and assumed that delay meant permission. Every misstep she rationalized, every injustice she committed, and every moment she thought she was untouchable added up quietly over time. That accumulation didn't disappear. It simply waited for the exact moment when correction was unavoidable. Warning time isn't a guarantee. It's a period of mercy. Once that period ends, the consequences arrive with clarity, precision, and inevitability. She didn't feel warned because she had already exhausted every opportunity to course correct. The absence of warning is part of what makes this kind of justice so shocking. Humans rely on signals, hints, and signs to gauge danger. When those vanish, the fall feels sudden. But what seems abrupt is actually the result of timing, calculation, and alignment. The external world doesn't need to intervene because the pattern has already been established. The moment she experienced 3 hours ago was the logical endpoint of a trajectory she herself set in motion. This form of justice also carries a deeper psychological weight. Without a warning, she cannot claim ignorance or delay response. There's no room to argue, negotiate, or deflect. The reckoning hits straight at the truth of her actions and their unavoidable consequences. That's why panic is so intense. It's not fear of the unknown. It's the realization that the opportunity to avoid this moment is gone forever. God doesn't warn those who no longer listen. 3 hours ago, she discovered what happens when the period of grace ends. Timing wasn't random, and the impact wasn't accidental. It was precise, unavoidable, and absolute. Number 11. Her shock comes from realizing you were never weak. The moment she felt the shift 3 hours ago, the fear wasn't just about consequences. It was the realization that she had miscalculated everything about you. For so long, she assumed that what she saw as vulnerability or restraint was weakness. She believed she could manipulate, intimidate, or control you without resistance. But the truth is, what she mistook for weakness was actually strength disguised as patience. That revelation is what sent her into panic, because it shattered the foundation of every assumption she had relied on to feel dominant. She is now forced to confront the fact that your calm, your silence, and your endurance weren't signs of submission. They were signs of alignment and wisdom. While she rushed to play her games, you were protected, centered, and untouchable. That clarity, arriving suddenly and unmistakably, is far more terrifying than any external punishment. It exposes the full depth of her misjudgment and the limits of her power. The real impact of this recognition is internal. It doesn't require public validation or dramatic confrontation. She feels the weight of her miscalculation in her own mind, a relentless replay of every time she assumed she had leverage over you. Her panic comes from realizing that all those moments where she thought she could bend reality to her will were illusions. You weren't vulnerable, and her belief that she could overpower you was false from the start. This is why the shift feels so immediate and heavy. You didn't need to act, argue, or fight. Your strength existed quietly, consistently, and without fanfare. The universe handled the correction while leaving you untouched. What she sees now, and what terrifies her most, is that the person she tried to undermine was never the person she could break. 3 hours ago, her entire perception of power, control, and dominance over you collapsed. She realized that the real force wasn't external. It was the quiet, unshakable strength you carried the whole time. That truth is not just humbling. It's devastating for anyone who believed they could outmaneuver it. Number 12. The real punishment is that she now sees herself clearly. 3 hours ago, when justice hit, it wasn't about external consequences. It was about a confrontation with truth she had avoided for far too long. The most devastating part of divine reckoning isn't losing possessions, status, or influence. It's facing the unfiltered reflection of who you really are. For her, that reflection arrived suddenly, unrelenting and impossible to spin. Every manipulation, every lie, every act of deceit she thought was hidden was now laid bare in her own mind. The weight of seeing herself clearly is heavier than any punishment that could come from the outside. This is why she is in shock. People can argue, excuse, or defend themselves against visible consequences, but they cannot negotiate with self-awareness. That moment of clarity strips away illusions, leaving only the raw truth. For someone who built a life on control, manipulation, and carefully curated appearances, this is unbearable. She must now confront the reality that her choices, intentions, and character are exactly what they are. No spin, no excuses, no audience to impress. What makes it even more devastating is that this clarity doesn't just touch her actions, it touches her identity. The person she thought she was, the version of herself she presented to the world, and the narratives she told herself to feel justified all collapse under the weight of recognition. This isn't just punishment, it's a reckoning of the soul, a mirror she cannot turn away from. And the brilliance of this kind of justice is its permanence. External punishments fade, apologies can be rehearsed, and reputations can be rebuilt. But self-awareness, once it pierces the illusion, doesn't leave. The discomfort, the shame, the realization of personal responsibility, all of it remains long after the world moves on. 3 hours ago, she experienced the kind of reckoning that can't be undone. She now knows herself fully, and that knowledge is heavier than any consequence. It's intimate, inescapable, and absolute. The real punishment was never what happened to her outside. It was the truth she can no longer hide from inside. Number 13. This justice closed a door she can never reopen. 3 hours ago, when the shift hit her, it wasn't just a temporary setback. It was a permanent boundary being enforced. Some consequences aren't about punishment in the moment. They're about ending cycles, closing chapters, and cutting access that was never meant to remain open. What she believed she could return to, manipulate again, or reclaim forever, is now gone. That door, once open for her advantage, has been shut for good, and the realization is devastating. The permanence of this closure is what terrifies her. People can recover from mistakes, rebuild reputations, or spin new narratives. But when divine timing decides a door must close, it doesn't matter how much she protests, schemes, or negotiates. No charm, no manipulation, no calculated move will unlock what was intentionally sealed. That's the difference between human correction and divine justice. One can be circumvented, the other is final. This closed door isn't just about opportunity, it's about control. She can no longer influence, intimidate, or benefit from what was once within reach. Every plan she made assuming access was guaranteed has failed. Every expectation she had about manipulating outcomes through that avenue is gone. The sudden recognition of this loss is what fuels panic, anxiety, and fear, because she now realizes that her previous leverage was an illusion. And the weight of finality is even worse because it comes without theatrics. She isn't publicly humiliated, and no one else needs to witness the closure. It lands quietly, internally, and yet the impact is undeniable. That silent, absolute separation forces her to confront her miscalculations and the reality that she cannot return to what she lost. 3 hours ago, she faced the truth that some doors are meant to remain closed, and when they do, it marks the end of opportunity, influence, and control. The lesson is permanent, unavoidable, and absolute. No negotiation, no pleading, and no attempt at manipulation will ever reopen it. The moment left her with one stark reality. Some things are gone forever, and divine timing ensures that the closure is both precise and irreversible. Number 14. God handled it this way so you wouldn't carry residue. 3 hours ago, when everything shifted for her, you didn't feel chaos, panic, or disruption because divine justice doesn't operate by dragging the innocent into aftermaths they weren't meant to carry. What happened was precise, surgical, and perfectly timed, leaving you untouched while the person who caused harm received the full weight of reckoning. The moment wasn't designed to be dramatic or public. It was designed to resolve the situation cleanly, so you wouldn't inherit the emotional, mental, or spiritual residue of someone else's downfall. Residue is heavier than any physical consequence. It's the stress, confusion, and emotional entanglement that often comes when people try to intervene, explain, or clean up the mess caused by others. You didn't have to expend energy managing the aftermath because it wasn't yours to bear. That's the brilliance of divine alignment. While she struggled with panic, exposure, and the collapse of control, you remained clear, grounded, and unaffected. The universe handled the correction in a way that kept your path intact, your energy intact, and your focus undisturbed. This type of justice is precise because it protects the innocent, while delivering the full lesson to the guilty. You didn't have to confront her, prove yourself, or justify your actions. Everything landed exactly where it needed to. That's why your calm feels so natural. It's a result of being aligned with truth, while she experiences the shock of miscalculation and consequence. The absence of residue also ensures that you can move forward without being dragged into cycles of blame, anger, or emotional exhaustion. You witness justice unfold without carrying the weight of the correction itself. The person who caused harm absorbs the shock, the panic, and the exposure, all of it concentrated where it belongs. 3 hours ago, God ensured that balance was restored while leaving you untouched. That's the mark of true protection. Correction occurs, lessons are delivered, but the innocent remain unburdened. You didn't just survive the moment, you were preserved, aligned and clear, while she faced exactly what she created. The outcome was absolute, precise, and free of residue. Conclusion. 3 hours ago, everything changed, not because of chaos, drama, or chance, but because truth finally aligned with timing, precision, and justice. What happened to her wasn't random punishment. It was exposure, a reckoning that revealed the reality she had spent years hiding from herself. Every manipulation, every lie, every false sense of control she believed she held collapsed in an instant. She realized too late that you were never weak, that divine justice doesn't require spectators, and that the doors she thought she could return to were closed forever. Her panic, shock, and unraveling were the natural outcomes of a trajectory she herself had set in motion, and while she faced the weight of her own actions, you remained untouched, calm, and aligned. This is the power of precision, timing, and divine alignment. True justice doesn't announce itself loudly, doesn't need witnesses, and doesn't wait for applause. It lands exactly where it should, correcting what is crooked, revealing what is hidden, and ensuring that the innocent remain protected. The real impact isn't always visible in the external world. It's felt internally by the person who has lived in deception, arrogance, or control. The lessons hit where they hurt most, leaving nothing to spin, manipulate, or deny. And the brilliance of it all is that you, the chosen, carry none of the residue. You are free, unburdened, and preserved, while the one who caused harm faces the full weight of their reckoning. Understanding this moment changes everything. It proves that timing matters more than effort, alignment matters more than struggle, and integrity preserves more than power ever could. It reminds us that the universe, divine order, or God doesn't just correct. It recalibrates, ensuring that truth is honored, injustice is addressed, and the innocent are shielded. If this message resonated with you, make sure to stay connected. Subscribe to the channel for more deep, mind-awakening content. Like this video if it hit you hard, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and drop a comment below to let us know how you felt. Your engagement helps spread these truths and keeps the conversation alive. This isn't just a story. It's a reminder that truth always finds its way, and the right people are always protected. God bless you.